right, Shalom. Let me get straight into this lesson. So I'm gonna be going into this insert from this book that I was telling you about in my last few lessons. So what you're looking at in this picture is prophecy that the real Hebrew Israelites that was prophesied in the Bible would go into cargo slave ships to go into slavery. And this was prophesied in the book of Deuteronomy. I'm gonna get into that scripture, but I got a lot to get to. So these are the true Jews, so-called. So let's go here. Matter of fact, this is the book that this is the information that this book is, this is the information that this is coming out this book right here, Salakia. Give me 1 second. Right, so this is the name of the book, Creole New Orleans, Race and Americanization. So let's get into this information that's in this book. Let's go here. I'll read this. It says, Louisiana State University. It says Creole New Orleans, Race and Americanization. Let me get straight to the point where it's highlighted at. It says page 67. It says 16 slave trading ships arrived from Senegal region. It says 6 ships came from Judah. I'm going to read that again. It says 6 ships came from Judah. So what is this? Matter of fact, let me show you this map. This is the slave coast that's been referred to as the slave coast. It says Kingdom of Judah. This is an old map. I forget the guy named that mapped this out. So let's go here. Kingdom of Judah. So these was the real so-called Jews. Judah, Benjamin, and Levi that fled into Africa, from the information of the book From Africa to Timbuktu. They fled into so-called Africa. They was fleeing Roman persecution, Salakia. So 6 ships came from Judah and landed at the mouth of the Mississippi. It says in 1731, 1 ship from Judah landed 464 slaves at the mouth of the Mississippi. All right, page 69. It says it states that the Company of India had trading posts at Judah with all the nations of so-called Europe. It says table 1 in the back of the book will show you the origins and number of slaves brought to Louisiana from Judah, Africa, from 1719 to 1743. So this is proof that the real so-called Jews, that they renamed Africans, and now they call them black people, and now they actually call themselves black people out of their own ignorance and African American. These were the true, and still is the true so-called Jews, Yahwadah. The people that's in the land right now are imposters. These are Amalekites. These are Edomites. It says right here, place of origin, and it goes through the ship and the number of slaves. It says at the bottom, it says total 1,749 so-called black Jews, so-called, transported to Louisiana between 1719 to 1728. So that's tangible proof. Remember, this is in this book right here, Salakia. So this is prophetic prophecy that real so-called Jews would go into captivity. They would go into bondage. Let's go here. Let's get into that prophecy. And this is a major prophecy so you can know who they were today. It says Deuteronomy 28 and 68. It says, and the Lord Yahweh shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships. What is this talking about? It says, by the way whereof I spake unto thee, thou shalt see it no more again. And there ye should be sold unto your enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you, meaning redeem you when you go into this word buy, because you got a lot of false interpretations that's causing confusion that saying otherwise. But this mean when you go into the Hebrew word, it means redeem. No one will save you out of this condition. And this word Egypt is interchangeable with bondage. They ain't talking about going into the physical place as you know as Egypt again with ships. That wouldn't make logistical sense if you know the proximity of Egypt and Israel. Salakia. I had a map, but let's keep going because time is steady going to keep ticking Salakia. So again with ships, so let's go here. So the Israelites it will be a heavy prophecy that would them going into ships, right, in slavery and being sold on these auction blocks, and that's recorded in the so-called American history. It says the transatlantic slave trade was let me get straight to the point. It says right here, it says the captured and Middle Passage. Remember they put this word Africans in there to cause that confusion, right? But these are Hebrew Israelites from the tribe of Judah, Benjamin, Levi, that was captured and transported all over the known world. It says Africans, which are Israelites, were seized through warfare or kidnapping. It says marched to the coast forts and packed onto ships under horrific disease-ridden conditions. Packed onto ships. Going back here. It says, and Yahweh shall bring thee into Egypt. Egypt means bondage in this context. Again with ships. That's a cold cut. So let's go here. Let's keep going. Salakia. And that's that word Egypt. So let's tie this up with a precept to make this make sense. It says Exodus 20:2. I'm the Lord Yahweh, thy power. It says, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. So you see Egypt and the house of bondage interchangeable there, where they're linking up to each other. So to show you that Egypt is a representation of bondage. Let's go here. What is bondage? So when it says going to Egypt again, that Egypt was what it meant bondage. It says bondage. It says the state of being enslaved. That's heavy. Let's go here. Matter of fact, I think this is the map I wanted to show you. If it loads up. All right, cool. So right here, this is a map of ancient Israel and ancient Egypt. Right? They border each other. So it wouldn't make sense for them to go into ships again in Egypt. That makes no logical, logistical sense. And also is no record of that. Because once we fled up, once we was delivered from Egypt, Egypt was never the same. It was around for, a while and this and that. But we made Egypt great. So when we left out, Egypt was really never the same. Yet it still had somewhat of influence and power to a certain degree, but it wasn't a mighty kingdom as it was when they had us enslaved. Right? So let's go back here. Okay, now this all makes sense. So the Israelites was prophesied from their disobedience to go into a hardcore captivity in ships. And this will be fulfillment of this prophecy in the transatlantic slave trade. All right, and then the other slave trades as well that went on and this and that. But this prophecy was explicit going into the description of what happened during the transatlantic slave trade. And you had the other tribes that were enslaved. They had a triangular slave trade going on because they was getting the jakes out of, as you know, in so-called Europe. They was dispersing them right throughout the Caribbean, and then they had enslaved a lot of jakes that was in the Americas, the so-called Native Americans, which were Israelites. And they was putting them on slave ships, sending them to different parts of the world, so on and so forth. So let's go here. Salakia. Let me let this load up. And there's a lot more information to this. I'm just trying to consolidate everything into this lesson. Let's go back here. This is what I want to read next. And I actually put this into Google. I went into this image right here, right? It says the image displays text from the book Creole New Orleans, Race and Americanization, edited by Hirsch and Joseph Logsdon, highlighting specific pages regarding the origins of enslaved people brought to Louisiana from Africa region known as Judah. You hear that? They even went into um, west coast of Africa, the west part of Africa, and they actually took DNA from some, which we don't get too caught up in all that because we know a lot of their pseudoscience. But they actually got this video of them talking to these so-called Africans, which are Israelites, and they, ran their DNA and they were saying they was the real Jews. So we're not making nothing up. It says a table summarizes the shipments concluded that 1,749 enslaved people from the region were transported between 1719 and 1728. It says source. Excerpts are from pages 67 and 69 of the book Creole New Orleans, Race and Americanization. It says origin. The text discusses slave trading ships arriving from Judah, referring to the major slave port in Odaya in Benin. It says shipments. 16 slave trading ships arrived from this region, with one ship in 1731 landing 464 enslaved people. It says a total of 1,749 enslaved people from Judah were imported to Louisiana between 1719 and 1728. This is history that you're not gonna never learn in in these devils colleges. So, and this that map, I forget this guy's name because I haven't read on this information in a while. This car, this, let me see. So, I guess I can go to that in another lesson, but you see this. So they know something. Like I say, the elites of Esau Edom, they know who we are. They know the truth. They're not going to tell you the truth. Because once they tell you, why are they not going to tell you the truth? Because the moment they tell you the truth, they lose all control. Right? They want to keep you in this mental captivity, this state of mind where you're totally confused on who you is, a spiritual bondage. So, and plus they the wicked. They're not going to do that. It says, hopefully, Salakia, hopefully this lesson was edifying. Call Hola Yahweh, Bahashim, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim, Rachak, Kodash, Shalom.